The idea of this masterclass is starting with the basic concepts in Mistika Boutique. We are not going into too much detail about all the aspects of Mistika. We are going to focus mostly in interface, managing clips, moving in the timeline, and to know a little bit how Mistika works. Because at the end, I always say that Mistika is not a complicated software. What it is different. It has a very different timeline, which is probably the most unique aspect in Mistika compared with other softwares. And that's maybe the more, well, not complicated, but the more different area that we need to cover. So we will spend most of the time of this masterclass in the timeline, just explaining a little bit how it works, how the clip work, how the effects work in the timeline, some aspect like the scopes of it, some editing, a little bit of editing of the clips, but everything just with the idea of explaining the logic behind the Mistika interface. So let's start explaining a little bit about the interface in a very general view. We have here the timeline, as you can see. This is an infinite space where I can just move anything anywhere, really. And as you can see, we don't have video tracks or audio tracks. In fact, we can just merge audio and video, put them in the same track, combine them, group them, etc., in a very flexible way. This at the beginning can be a little bit shocking because it's really different compared with other softwares again. But once you start to learn and to understand how Mistika works, you see that this flexibility is a very unique aspect of Mistika and a very powerful feature that no one else has. You can, for example, just to put an example of this, you can manage versions in a really, really easy way, having all these versions in the same timeline without saving this project, open a project with another version of the same clip or the same editing. You can just have everything in the same place and organize all your clips and all your media in the way that you want. So this is the timeline, and again, we will spend most of the time in here. So we will see more aspects of it later. So then we go to the dashboard. And this is the dashboard over here. This has the most basic tools in Mistika. Basically, it covers a general workflow, and it follows a logic order. So we have first the project manager to create a new project. Then we have the media for import media and managing our media inside my project. Then we have the edit tab with all the edit functionalities related with our timeline. Then we have our effects library. As you see, we have many effects on here. For those that are really interested in the color grading area of Mistika, we will make a masterclass about color grading. But in here, I can just highlight the fact that the color grade is only one effect in the whole library of Mistika. This means that this effect can be combined with all of them in any way. So this flexibility as well is another unique aspect of Mistika compared with other solutions. Then finally, we have a third area that is the visual editor. We have some clips over here. And the visual editor is normally the area where you spend most of the time. So if the timeline is the area where you manage your project and all your clips, in here in the visual editor, you basically manage one shot. You make here all the adjustments for the shots, all the effects, all the grading, all the compositing, everything is done in the visual editor here. Again, we will see basically timeline and visual editor in this masterclass, and we will see as well some aspects here of the dashboard. Not all of them, because again, we cannot just check all the editing functionalities, all the effects, etc. So we will go to the most important ones. All right, so the first thing that we need to do when we work with Mistika is, of course, to create a new project. But you always need to select the settings for this project. So to do that, I'm going to close Mistika. Or, yeah, go here. Yeah, close it. I'm going to save this. Okay. And then I'm going to open the Mistika Config utility. The Mistika Config utility is the application that we use to manage, select the configuration for our projects. We are going to focus in this masterclass in two tabs, the general and the master formats. in general, we have our presets. So if we load this, we have a list of presets for our projects. As you can see, we have a normal resolution presets like HD, 4K, 2K, 8K, etc. And we have as well VR because, well, most of you will know that Mistika is really powerful in the virtual reality area. So we have some presets as well here for VR projects. None of those presets can be changed in the aspect ratio, in the resolution aspect. So for example, if I load the factory preset for HD, and then I go to master format, the moment that I try to change it, I have a warning message telling me that I cannot change the resolution for this preset. So keep this in mind. And if you want to create a preset to just, I don't know, change the resolution to play with Mistika a little bit and get used to it and get familiar with the software, I always recommend to create a new preset. So we can just go to here, new, and we can call it whatever we want. So custom res. Oops. Res. Okay, so now this preset can be changed in the way that we want. So we can just put in here any resolution. As you can see, Mistika is calculating the aspect ratio and all the aspects related with this resolution. This area here is the one related with the settings of the project, and this area here is the one related with the video output. An important thing here is that you can select a video output resolution different than the project resolution and a different frame rate compared with the frame rate of the project. So you can just manage both areas independently. Normally, well, Mistika works in a dynamic way. So even if you're selecting here, and in fact, I'm going to do it, I'm going just to put HD resolution because I don't need more for this masterclass. Even if I select an HD resolution in here, if I then change the resolution for 4K, the project that I open, once I open Mistika, that project will be adapted to 4K as well, because again, the resolution is dynamic. As long as we put our media with framings or any effects that automatically adapt the resolution of the clips to the resolution of the project, everything will be adapted automatically. Okay. So, but in this case, we're going to keep it simple. I'm going to select HD and the frame rate to 24. So I'm going to click OK, and now I have to open Mistika. All right. So the first thing that we see when we open Mistika is the user area. We have several users in here. We can create a new user by going to Edit User Modes. So from here, we can create a new user. And if you want to change the hotkeys of Mistika, we can just go to Hotkeys, double click. And then we have the library of functionalities to select the functionality that you want and the hotkey for that functionality. Okay. In this case, I don't need to create any new user. So double click over the user and Mistika will start. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do once Mistika is open is, of course, creating a new project. And we will explain a little bit what is a project in Mistika, because the concept is a bit different compared with other solutions. So again, I will show you the unique things of the Mistika projects here and explain a little bit why they are really powerful for some tasks. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to project. And in here, I'm going to create a new project. Here I have a message telling me the resolution of the project, the frame rate, etc. This is just an information window. That doesn't mean that I cannot change the resolution of the frame rate of this project. Again, I can just change it in the Mistika config, open this project again, and everything will be adapted to those settings. So this is just information. So I click OK, and I'm going to call it Masterclass. Okay, once we create our project, a new window opens, which is the media file manager. And as you can see, I'm going to go one level up. When we create a new project in Mistika, we have basically a folder that is called with the name of the project, Masterclass. And inside we have several subfolders. We're going to focus on the data folder because it's the most important one. Right now, if we go inside, we don't have anything other than render and render draft. This is because in the output panel, I'm not going to talk a lot about output, but in this case, just to explain a little bit what that means, we have two kind of render, master render and draft render. This is just for organizing purposes. I basically place the links to the render in different folders so we can organize those render in a more cleaner way. So again, going back to media here, we have render and render draft. The rest is empty. So of course, the first thing we need to do is to load our media here in my project. I have some bookmarks here saved, just as a demonstration of how these bookmarks work, because I can just double click in here and go directly to the folder of my media. Basically, what I did was just navigating. Let me make this a bit bigger. Just navigate to my unit in here, just select the folder that I want, drag and drop, and that's it. Now you have your bookmark in your path bookmarks. In this case, for this masterclass, I'm going to use JS files. The JS files is an internal format from Mistika. It's really fast and it's very useful when you need to work with really complex projects. It allows you to create. They're not proxies because at the end you can have JS in it's a lossless format, but they are really fast compared with other formats. So I'm going to go up. Just select the folder, right-click, and click. And we have here three options. We have import all movies, import all sequence, and import all media. Sequence are related with image sequences, of course, and movies with one file, with a movie. So I can, if I have mixed media in a folder, I can just select the one that I have, the type of media that I want to import. Of course, if I click in import all media, I will import everything. In this case, I know that the JS are movies, so I can just click in import all movies. And here I have this window telling me the name of the folder that is going to be used in my data folder again. Remember that we have our project name, then data, which is the most important folder, and the links to the media are going to be saved in a subfolder inside data with this name. I can just select any name in here, so feel free to change it if you want. And here is telling me which part of the clip and the path will be used for naming the link to the media. Mistika never moves media, never remove it, never copy or cut. It just creates links to the media. The links are open text files, which is really useful in case that, I don't know, you have you're an engineer or you have some ITs in your company and you want to create some scripts. The fact that they are open is really useful for these kind of situations. But well, in this case, just focus on the idea that we always create links to the media. We never move the media from the original path. So I'm going to click on import. And now Mistika is creating the links to that media. So let's finish it. OK. I go to this icon here with the home button. So I go to here. And as you can see now in data, we have a new folder with the name that we have selected for this media. If I open it, I have my LNK, which is basically the link to the media. All right. I can just import all of my clips, but well, just to keep it simple, I'm going just to select some of them. So we select some of them, just drag and drop over my timeline. And there we go. Now we have some clips in my timeline. OK, so let's just start talking about the timeline. So talking about the unique aspects of this timeline. As you can see, we have two cursors in here. We have the 0 point that marks my 0 point code. And then we have this cursor, which is basically like my player. Then we have this small cursor over here, which basically means where you want to import something new. So you can place it in the point of this cursor over here. All right. So we have basically two cursors for the user and a third cursor to mark the 00 time code. Okay. And as we said at the beginning, we can just move any clip anywhere, really. Okay, so we have full flexibility of that. Normally, Mistika user will work with the constraint X applied. So if we go to here to the edit panel, go to setup. If we click in constraint, we can only move the clip in vertical. This is being used normally by most of the Mistika users. In my case, I'm going just to leave it disabled because I just want to move things in a free way to explain the Mistika features in an easier way for me. So I'm just going to leave it that way and going back to my timeline. So as you can see, all of my clips here in dark green has a small icon, a small thumbnail here that I can move with the right button of the mouse. In Mistika, every time that you need to move something in the interface is done with the right button of the mouse. For example, here I'm just dragging the timeline and moving with the right button. If I double click this clip, I go to my visual editor. And in here, if I want to move my image, again, is with the right click with the right button of my mouse. Okay. I'm going to come back to my timeline. Normally, if you have two monitors, you will have the visual editor in one monitor and the timeline in another monitor. In my case, because I only have one monitor for this masterclass, I need to use this back button to come back to the timeline. Okay. All right, so normally when we work with Mistika, this, of course, is a really simple situation. We only have our track with clips, but the moment that you start putting things, it start growing. And there's a moment, let's put something like this. There's a moment where my stacks start to be relatively big. A stack, what we call a stack, is this amount of clip plus the effects on top of it. It looks like layers, but it's not really a layer. It's a node graph internally. As you can see, if we open my node graph interface here, we have the clip and my effects over here. And there is a connection between the node graph and the timeline. So if I insert something new, let's say a unicolor appears as well in the timeline. So both are connected. I'm showing this because normally you will spend most of the time working in the timeline mode, but internally this works more like a node graph. And in fact, if you have a really complex situation of compositing, you will use the node graph better than the timeline mode, because working by layers in a very complex situation can be really complex. So we support both modes for those situations. Okay, so I'm going to disable my node graph here, and I'm going to still focus on my timeline. So this is my stack, and as I said, once you start working with Mistika, the timeline starts to grow. The stacks start to grow. So for that reason, we have several zoom levels over here. So we can just change them to see my timeline in a cleaner way or in a more manageable way. Okay. Of course, if we change the zoom level, the thumbnail disappears. Related with this, if you are working in this mode and you have your thumbnails, depending on the media that you are using, the resolution of your media, the complexity of your project, etc., you can feel that the timeline is a bit laggy because it needs to calculate all those thumbnails on the fly. So if you have a lot of shots, a lot of cuts, and you are using, I don't know, raw media in red or whatever, the timeline can feel a bit laggy. So for that reason, you can just go to here again to edit, setup, and you have the option to video icons to select none. And in that case, you can hide all the thumbnails or just first and last frame, or you can just select the icons that you want to see. Okay. In this case, I'm going to leave it in only for the active frame because, again, I'm using JS, which is fast, so I don't have that problem right now. All right, so now let's see a little bit of editing in this timeline. I'm going to remove those effects because even if you can edit, of course, with all the effects applied, and we will do it later. I think it's easier to see the editing functionalities by just focusing on the clips. So we have here my clips, and let's say we want to cut, for example, this clip. The fastest way to do it is use the gestures. Gestures in Mistika is the most common way of work when you are a more advanced user. Basically, the normal tasks like grouping clips or cutting clips, join them, pack them in vertical, whatever. All of them are done by gestures. In this case, I'm going just to show a couple of them. I don't want to give you all the gestures in this masterclass because that will be madness. But let's say that, for example, we want to cut this shot in two, to split it. So I'm going to move it. I'm going to move with the right button and select the point where I want to cut. And with the middle button of the mouse, from top to the bottom, I can just divide the clip in two. If I want to group them, I can just check them. I'm going to join. I can use the shortcut, which is the J, as you can see in there, to join both clips. If we want to, well, this join works when the clip is the same one. If you want to join two clips that are different, you will see that nothing happens because there's no timecode continuity between them. The name is the same. Basically, the clip is different, so you cannot join them. So in that situation, if you want to merge or to join two clips, the fastest way is just group them. Talking about the groups, I'm going to ungroup this. Basically, a group, if I group this shot, basically a group is an empty timeline where I have my shot and all the contents associated to my shot. So for example, I'm going to ungroup this again by going to ungroup. If I put some effects on top of it and select all my stack, I can just make my timeline clean by group this shot. And now if I navigate into this shot, we see that we have an empty timeline for this shot with all the effects applied on top of it. So this is another way to simplify my timeline, not only with the effects, not only with the zoom levels, but with the groups as well. So I'm going just to ungroup this again. Okay. Now let's say that we want to trim my clips, which is another basic functionality for editing. This is one of the points where new users normally find a little bit difficult because it's not, we don't have a cursor or something like that to make the trim. It's basically, again, a gesture. It's a combination of buttons. So basically, we move internally in the clip with the right click, with the right button, go to the head or the tail. And in here, with the right button pressed, we click with the left button and just drag to move to one direction or the other. As you can see, when we go far than the duration of the clip, we get this dark green area here. This means that in this area, the first frame is frozen, and then it starts the clip. There is a useful functionality here. If you, for example, are making those editings and you want to check if your editing is good without checking shot by shot, you can just go to Edit, Setup, and you can click in Show Overtrim. And in that way, the overtrim is clearly visible in the timeline, even if you make a zoom out of your project. I'm going to disable in this case, because another overlap that can be interesting and is normally enabled by default is the show overlaps. So for example, if I move this over my clip, as you can see, automatically we get this overlap over my clips. So it's another way, again, to check that my editing is done in the right way. I'm going to recover this trim, doing what I did, just going to the head, right button, left button, and drag. All right. Now let's say that, for example, we trim this clip and we put it in this moment in timeline. Now we want to remove this empty space between my clips. So I have a way to do it, a really fast way to do it, which is take the clips that are involved in this space, and we can just click in pack to one side or to the other side. We can use a gesture for this as well. So for example, if I select these two clips, the gesture is from bottom to top. It's like creating a triangle. And there we go. This is one direction, or the other direction. So as you can see, most of this stuff can be done with gestures, which allows to navigate and to work faster in Mistika's timeline. For trimming, we can use as well the calculator in here, so we can trim in specific steps. So let's say that we want to trim in 25 steps, in 25 frames, sorry. So I can just trim head, and as you can see, I'm just trimming my clips. This is affecting in local, as you can see. I'm going to select a lower value so we can see it clearly. I'm going to recover this clip, and then I'm going to trim this head. As you can see, the mode selected is local. This means that when I trim, I'm moving the shot that is just close to the selected shot. If I do the same thing with the tail, I will affect the other one. If instead of using the local, I use the select one, then I create in the trim. I don't move in anything else because this is affecting only the selected shot. And if I'm using the global mode, this will move the whole timeline. So we have here 3 modes of trimming and the way that they affect the rest of my timeline. All right, so now let's take a look to the effects and the concept of the scope of the effects in my timeline. We have seen in here, I'm going to load some ARRI media. So we have some raw media, and in that way we can see as well now normal workflows. So I'm going to load some sequences here, import all sequences. Okay, I'm creating the links for ARRI. There we go. So in here, for example, this is ARRI raw media. So the first thing I'm going to do is to load my ARRI params in here, which is my divider for this kind of media. I'm going to use this example to explain the concept of the scope that I will go in more details later. But basically, as you can see, every effect has a scope of action. In fact, as you can see, this divider is taking the clip. If now I insert a framing, the scope of the framing is only taking the params, the ARRI params. But because the ARRI params is taking the clip, the 3 of them are connected. It's like a chain. In fact, if we go to my visual editor by double-clicking framing, we have here the eval tree. And as you can see, we can see the flow of the clip with the effects with this arrow here. And you can see that the 3 of them are connected. As you have seen, we have like 2 colors here in the eval tree, the blue one and the green one. The blue one is basically our output. Is the image that we are going to see in our video output, or in the output of my project. And the green one is the one that we use to select the effects or the clips to change the parameters over here. So I can just change any parameter here and see the result with the rest of the effects apply. Close to this, we see this this little I button, which is basically the bypass to bypass the effect in the entire stack. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about basic workflow. In this case, we have the ARRI params. By default, when we go in here, now we are in the visual editor, we have the parameters of the effects in this area here. All the parameters of the effects will be there all the time. Here we have some tabs. There are the general tabs, shapes, tracking, detect stems, functionality, display filters, etc., that are general to any effect. So even if we load a different effect, we will see those tabs as well in here. If you load an effect that has a special interface like the color grading, this interface will appear in here. But again, the parameters, the numeric parameters of my effects are always here in the left of my visual editor area. So again, I was in the ARRI params, effect. And as you can see, we have here all the values and it says source. This means that it's taking the value from the camera, but of course we don't see the real number of this value. So to see the real number, what I'm going to do is just to come back to my timeline. I'm going to select my entire project on my timeline here, go to macros, and here we have load raw params. With the load raw params, I can see that now there is a new icon here on top of my effects. That means that this effect has been modified compared with the default values. So now if I go by double clicking in this shot as an example, we now see that we have all the values of the camera. The image hasn't been changed because again, it's taking the values of the camera, which is what we do at the, what we did at the beginning, but now we see the right values here. Now there is another important element here in the interface, in the visual editor, which says rescaled from this resolution. This means that the resolution of the media is different compared with the resolution of the project. So to adapt the resolution of my media to my project, I'm going to insert a framing effect. So I go to framing, and here we have my framing effect. Again, the framing effect has some special interface for it. From here, even if we have several options here, I'm going to focus on the idea that the aspect ratio of my media and my project is the same one. So this is going to make the things easier. And I'm going to go to here to result size. And what I'm going to do is to select project. If you remember what we said at the beginning, Mistika changed the resolution in a dynamic way. So right now, if I change the resolution of my project by going back to the Mistika config, the next time that I open this project, it will have the resolution that I selected in the MConfig. So again, if I'm working, even if I'm working in HD, if now I change that resolution to 4K, let's say, this will automatically adapt the resolution of my media to 4K. So it's a very easy way to manage complex with projects with different resolutions. All right, so what I'm going to do now is to propagate this parameter over the rest of my framing nodes, because of course all of them are the same. So again, double click over my framing, select the parameter that I want to propagate. I can select the whole effect or just the parameters that I want. In this case, I'm going just to select the result size, going to propagate. And by default, it's selected all objects, which makes sense because I'm going to propagate in all the framings of my timeline. So I select all objects, perform propagate. And now we have here a warning message telling me that the default values of the rest of the framings are going to be overwritten, which is fine. Okay. Now, if we go to here, we see that we have the same parameter applied to the rest of the framing. As you can see, all the time what I'm doing is just going back and forth between the timeline and the visual editor, timeline visual editor, which looks a bit not ideal at all, of course. So in the visual editor, we have a navigation mode, which is the storyboard. I'm going to open it because right now it's off. I'm going to click it in split. Now it's calculating all the thumbnails for my storyboard. We have different levels of zoom. I'm going to stay in the smaller one. And here I'm not going to explain in detail the storyboard because it has many functionalities, but just remember some things. Here we have the order of the shot. We see in this 15, it means that is the shot 15 in my timeline. And you see a white box in the selected shot. Then we have the red box for the reference shot, which is being used normally for color grading when you want to bring a color grading, a grading in from one shot to another, or to create a snapshot to compare two shots, etc. In this case, I'm going just to focus only in the white one because I want to use the storyboard as a navigation tool. So what I'm going to do is just to, with the Shift button pressed, I can just move between the shots in my timeline. So I don't need to navigate to the timeline to switch and change my shots. Okay. Right. We have as well this button here to navigate from one to one, which of course is much faster when you have a panel, a color grading panel or something like that. So you don't need to go to this area here. You can just using the panel to navigate through the shots using the storyboard. All right, so these situations that we have in here in my timeline is like a very basic situation. We normally have a divider for your media, a framing to adapt your media to your project. And now let's say that, okay, this is my original situation. I know that I'm going to have my divider and my framing all the time. So maybe I don't need to see them all the time in my timeline. I prefer to keep this simple, collapse all my shots and start working from there. So I can just select all my shots, going to group layers, to macros, and click in group segments. And once I do it, you see that all my segments has been grouped And now if I go inside one of those groups, I still have the parameters and the framing. Okay, so from here I can just insert another functionality like the color grading, and now I start making the grading here. So basically we have simplified our timeline from 2 effects, and with the color grading will be 3, to just 1 track with my media and another track for my grading. There is another kind of group that is still in development that can be useful for you guys if you want to try, which is the media group. I'm going to clone this shot and this stack by clicking Alt, but by pressing Alt and just dragging, so I can just duplicate my stack. And I'm going to, instead of select group in here, I'm going to go to macros and select group as a media group. If I select this functionality, you see that the color of the clips are different. The group is this light green, and then we have this dark green. This looks like a normal shot, but once we go in here by double clicking, we see that we have the array params inside my group. So if we compare, in this group, I don't have any params at all because Mistika understands that all the parameters are below the group, are inside this group. But in a media group, again, I'm going to move with shift click. In a media group, I have the params of the contained effects in here. So the last point of this masterclass is about the edit and the play marks. Because of course, with the flexibility of this timeline and the fact that you can have like multiple versions, as you can see, we have one edit in here, one different edit there. There is no connection, there is no any relation between them. I just put in things wherever I want. The moment that you want to play something or to render something, you need to isolate the area that you want to use. So we have 2 kind of marks. We have the edit marks and the play marks. As the name say is just, if I select this, I can just play this area. So in the video output, we will play this area. If we select this with the edit marks, the moment that we go to the output, we will render only the area selected with these marks. So basically, we have 2 marks to control a little bit better the timeline for rendering or for playing the areas that we want to use. All right, so I think this is the last 2 points for this masterclass. Now is the moment to ask any questions. The questions doesn't need to be related with the subject of this masterclass. If you want to make questions about more advanced stuff, go ahead. We will try to answer them. Okay, so users asking if they can change Mistika paths to live on a network directory to share the project between artists. Yes, of course. If we go to the MConfig here. Here we have the file path menu. I haven't explained this because this isn't entering too much detail. Basically, because Mistika has been always used in big companies for big projects, big blockbuster movies, etc. These kind of companies demands a more organized way to work, and that's the reason why we have like a very strict or very fixed project path system. So from here we can just select the project directory, the project media, and of course we can use a central storage to manage all the media and all the projects. So every artist can work directly over that storage. Another user is asking if there is a list of all the gesture to download. It's in the manual. I'm not quite sure in which chapter. I think it's in the beginning of the manual. But in there is an image with all the gestures and the functionalities that are covered by those gestures. In any case, if you want to see them in an independent way, we can just upload them to the forum, or we can just send them to you. There is another question. Is there a way to name a group of clips so that when you render in a batch, the file names will match those? Yes, you can group clip. I'm going just to close this. Sorry, there we go. You can just come to here. This can be done with any effect or any group. So I can just go to here, go to edit, attributes, and you can change the name here. So let's call it shot array row. Oops, I'm using the English keyboard. Shot array row. Okay, so now you have just renamed it your group. Another question is, how can I keep the render marks from Mistika VR to be represented and used in Mistika Boutique? Good question. Right now, when you create marks in Mistika VR and then you move to Mistika Boutique, the marks are created here internally of the clips, which is probably a bit hidden, but I'm going to show you. Basically, I've explained the edit marks and the play marks, but then internally we have another kind of marks, which is the notes and markers. If I don't select anything in my timeline and just create a mark, as you can see, a mark will appear in here, which is a very good way to try to find I don't know, some shots that we need to review again, or that they require more work or whatever. This is like a fast way to do it. But if I select one clip and put some marks, the mark is created inside this clip. So basically, when you bring something from Mistika VR, what you have is this kind of internal marks in your clips. So this is it's different from the edit marks or the play marks, basically because in Mistika Boutique you can only have two edit marks, sorry. So I cannot have one edit mark here and then create another one there. You see that automatically basically switch the position. So the only way to have those marks per shot is to have this system here. Another user is asking, how does it handle color space and calibrated monitors? Basically, Mistika is very unique as well in this aspect because the timeline in Mistika is agnostic. It doesn't have any kind of color space applied. So you can combine color space in the way that you want. For example, let's use this as an example. I'm going to use the array row file. So I'm going to ungroup this. This clip right now is in white gamut log C color space. Let's say that I want to put it in aces. Right, so now it's in aces color space and linear light. Then I can just go to my color management tool, which is the unicolor. And the unicolor can be applied per shot or per group of clips. Again, with the trimming functionality, remember right button, click button. Oops, I have this in global. So select. I'm going to select again this. I can just take all of my shots, or again, I can just use it per shot. So I'm going to apply it here, unicolor. This is our color management tool. And as you can see, we have an input curve, an input gamut, convert gamut, and output curve. In this case, we are using linear and aces. Okay, so from here, we can just convert it to whatever we want. Let's say that we want to come back to Alexa white gamut. So I can just select white gamut and log C. And now we are recovering the color space from Alexa. Or we can just select another color space. Let's say slug from Sony and the Gamut 3, whatever. So you can manage the color space of your shots or your timeline or your group of clips. You can just select the color management in a very individual and flexible way. Of course, for example, you can work in this color space, apply a color grade, and then create another unicolor to transform this again from slog2, which was our origin, and sgamut 3, and transform it to, I don't know, again, aces, just to going back, and linear light. So you basically are making any kind of operations can be done in this way. Those are connected effects, so you can just select one color space and then going back, or select another color space, etc. Oh yeah, this is a pretty common question: how to make a side-by-side comparison between timeline and QuickTime reference. There is not like a built-in functionality specifically designed for that in Mistika. But again, in Mistika, it's really, really flexible, so you can build your own comparison mode and save it for future use. So to do that, I'm going to use this clip, and I'm going to duplicate it just to show how this works. Let's say I'm going to create a color grade, and just to see the difference between one and the other, I'm just going to change one of them. I'm going to group this. Okay, so now we have one and the other shot, and we want to compare both of them, right? So the fastest way to do it is use the wipe functionality. We can just go to wipe, select wipe, and if we go to here, double click, we see that the wipe has an animation that, of course, we don't want. Basically, if we want to reset the parameters here animated, we can just take the parameter that is being animated, which is the grade, press delete, and you see that now it stays in 50. So now you have a way to compare one clip with the other. If you want to save this as an effect for future use, you can just, well, in fact, you can just rename it. Like the fastest way is just rename it and say side by side, for example. And now you can go to FX preset here, create, and just call it side by side, for example. Side by side. Okay. And now you have an effect that can be used in any project and with that functionality applied. Another way to do it, and really interesting one, is using the stereo 3D function for that. The stereo 3D is interesting for this because basically it has a proper interface to compare between one eye. This would work like left eye, right eye, but we can consider it like my reference and my editing. So I can just go to here and select side by side. So I'm checking side by side, or select left and right. I can just switch between them with E and R, which are the shortcuts. So I can just switch in a really fast way between them. I can apply, I don't know, a checkerboard, so I can compare both of them, mix between them, difference as well. Of course, there is not a difference, but let's say that one of the clips has some kind of offset at 2 frames. Then with the difference, we can just see that there is an offset between the shots. So the stereo 3D allows us to work in a more advanced way to compare 2 clips in my timeline. More questions. Is Mistika OCO compatible? Not yet. It's something that we are starting to implement, and we will do it in the future for sure, but it's not yet compatible. I will work. Okay. I'm just reading another question, guys. This is long. Bend image in 3D space. Some user is asking which are basically the reasons to buy Mistika over Resolve, Scratch, etc., and other softwares. Because it's asking that, for example, it's asking that Resolve has Fusion integrated, which is a really nice compositing tool, of course. And which are the points that Mistika can offer you compared with those softwares? Basically, we have to understand that at the end, Mistika can offer you a flexibility that no other software can offer, thanks to the timeline. To deliver like a lot of versions for one specific company, or yeah, to have, for example, let's say that you have an HDR project and you have to deliver your HDR, SDR, you have to deliver in 2K, 4K, etc. The timeline allows you to manage all your project in the same space. So the capability of having everything in the same space gives you a lot of flexibility. As far as I know, in Resolve, for example, if you want to move from the color grading part to the visual effects part, there is like some kind of bridge between them, and the color grading math from one side and the other are different because at the end they are different softwares. In here, everything is built in the same system. Everything works in the same timeline. So you don't need to go inside the compositing mode or go inside the color grading mode. The color grading effect can be used as well for visual effects. And the visual effects here can be used for color grading. It's very creative in this way. It doesn't have any kind of rules that needs to be always applied to get some results. And thanks to that, we can see that in Mistika, we always get like an impressive result for very different users. It's really funny to see how different users use Mistika in a really different ways. And that's only and this is only possible thanks to the Mistika's timeline and the way that we can just combine all of these effects together without restrictions, without going to one mode to another. Just combine all of them in the stack, in the timeline, and that's it. Is the stitching interface more or less busy than the edit user interface? About the stitching interface that we have in here, it follows the same structure that we can see in there. It follows the same structure with the same parameters and everything. For those users that comes from Mistika VR, I quite understand that at the beginning it can be complicated because, well, Mistika VR basically used the new interface that we are developing as well for Mistika Boutique. Mistika Boutique is still, I mean, it's growing every day. The interface is one of the biggest projects that we have for Mistika Boutique. We will start for the color grading part because it's one of the most important ones in Mistika, but at the end it will affect the rest of the software. So yeah, I mean, I quite understand because if you see Mistika VR, it's really flexible, it's really easy to use, it's really clean. That's because that interface is new. And now we have to change in Mistika basically every panel and move to that interface. We will do it sooner or later. In fact, we are currently doing it. If you go to the media, you have that interface that you have in Mistika VR. Project has as well the same interface. There are some panels that already have the interface. Now we are just moving the whole Mistika to that new interface to make the GUI even more flexible. Another question is, what's the best way to handle a project outputting in multiple resolution aspect ratios? For example, a commercial that has an HD deliverable 1:1 for Instagram, 5.4 for Instagram, etc. So different resolution. Do you have to keep quitting Mistika and resizing the project with MConfig? Yes, right now, yes, because basically you can just output in your output panel. You have the possibility of select here in the scale the setting that you want. So the question is, the answer is yes and no. You can rescale it out directly from here. But I normally, as a user, I normally don't do it from here because I always want to check that my render is good. And the only way to do that is to output Mistika, enter again, and see the different results. So again, yes, you can do it from here, but I always wanted to check that everything is correct before making the render. How about mixed frames? That Mistika do a conversion between frame rates? Are there tools to have to convert those clips smoothly to the interlace footage, etc.? Yes, the Mistika's timelines is agnostic in every way: resolution, frame rate, and color space. You can mix frame rates or clips from different frame rates. What we don't do automatically is to duplicate or remove frames. For example, if you go to an editing software, and I think any editor will work in here, Premiere, Avid, Final Cut, whatever, all of them, if you load a clip with a different frame rate in a timeline with another frame rate, automatically that timeline will calculate based on the duration of the clip, will calculate the amount of frames that it has to use, and the software will duplicate and remove frames automatically. Mistika as a finishing solution is very risky for us to do that kind of task. So basically what we do is always to keep the original amount of frames of the clip. We never transform by default that information. If you want to do it, of course you can do it. You can just go to here, for example, and you can use a time warp if you want to change the duration of your clip, and selecting the speed. And in this case, it's using optical flow, so it will create, basically based on optical flow, it will create new frames. It won't duplicate or remove frames. It just creates new frames, which is the best tool to create this kind of slow motion clips. If it's the editing functionality that you can find in the editor softwares, we have another kind of time warp, which is this one here. So you can group time warp, and as you can see now, it has another color. In fact, if you conform an XML, AAF, or ADL that comes from these editor softwares, if you have a clip with a different, with a time remapping done over there, you will see this over the clip. So you have the 100 information here. I can just change the duration, and as you can see now is changing and calculating this the change that Mistika has to have to done over this clip to manage this new duration. So for example, if you need to duplicate the duration of your clips, you take it, you can just move it to or you can just multiply per 2. It's another solution. So use the calculated, get duration, multiply per 2, and set duration. And automatically now you have adapted your clip to the new duration. But again, this has to be done by the user manually, because the other way, we have clients that probably will complain about it because they don't want to see duplicated frames or removed frames from their media. So that's the reason why we manage this manually. What is the best way to do a side-by-side conform check? Is what we explained before. Again, is just as a reminder, I'm going to duplicate this. The best way for me is, the fastest way is to use the wipe. And just as you can see, this has an animation. You can just remove the animation. Now we have a side-by-side comparison mode, or using the stereo 3D, which allows me to switch between the different modes, create a different mode to see if there is an offset between frames, or the checkerboard, or there are several ways to do this. And what I did in the first example was to rename this this wipe by calling it side by side, and I can just save this effect like a new effect in my FX preset library here. We have it there, so we can just create, rename, name it as you want, and you will have it there. Efficient use of GPU and render farm concept. All right, Mistika always work on GPU, and that's the reason why is I don't know if we can call it probably the most powerful system, but we know for sure, for example, that we are capable of doing 8K playback in 60 frames per second uncompressed, which is something that is really, really unique. I'm talking about 60 frames per second, not on the interface, which is easy. I'm talking in the video output directly using AJA video boards. So, and that's because we use GPU for calculate almost everything in Mistika. We use CPU for transcoding or decoding depending of the codec. If we have the codec optimized for GPU, or because of the codec, the official codec, I don't know, for example, Red has now a version of their firmware that supports GPU. And the new GPUs from NVIDIA. With that firmware, we can play it faster. But that does not depend on Mistika. It depends on the manufacturer of the codec and the cameras. So that's the only part that can depend of the CPU. Everything that is on us, everything that we develop, is developed to work efficiently on the GPU. And the render farm, which is the other question, is one of the next things that we are going to cover in the next release of Mistika Boutique. I'm not quite sure if it's the next one or another one after that, but it will be there very soon. Basically, in the output panel, you will have a button to send your media to your render farm, the one that you prefer, and you will have it there for rendering. Could you cover a time warp tool you have in Boutique? And is there any tools for rolling shutter compensation, removing flickering drones blades? Is there a way to export stabilization from external software from VR content like Mocha VR or Synthesize to Boutique? All right, Mocha VR is already supported. The support on Mocha VR is already done. We have it in fact in here, Boris FX Mocha Pro. I cannot change it here because I don't have the license that we use for NAB in this case. But I can just use Mocha implemented here. In fact, if I just load it, you see that this is one effect integrated in my timeline. And I can just make the stabilization in Mocha Pro and use that stabilization to you in Mistika. That's not a big problem. Synthesize, I think I don't remember, but I think we support other trackers softwares, and what they done, I'm not quite sure in this case for Synthesize, but I can check and going back to you later. There is, when you load a synthesize project, I think what it does is creating a Com3D file, a Com3D node with the camera setting here, with the values of the camera setting here stabilized. So I think it's, some of them are supported, but again, I'm not quite sure about the particular case of synthesize. So yeah, we'll come back to that later. About the time warp, which was another question. Yeah, it's just, I'm going to, just to show you how this works, I'm going to use a longer shot like this one. Basically, if we go to the time warp node in here, there you go. I can just select the speed of my clip. So let's say that I want to select 20%. Okay. And in this case, what Mistika does is analyzing the shot and using optical flow to create new frames. And for that reason, I can just have this kind of, well, I don't know if you will see it on streaming, but you will have this kind of a very slow and smooth movement in my shots. Of course, I just select 20% of the speed in a 24 frames per second shot. And for that reason, if we go back, we can see here, just to, well, this happens. This is because of the optical flow. If when there is a lot of movement and there is some occlusion, if you don't have enough information of your shots, it can create those artifacts, of course, the typical artifacts of the optical flow. But yeah, the way to do it is really simple. Just change the speed and that's it. You can change the smoothness and the levels here to increase or decrease the quality. If you use a bigger quality, basically it takes more time to render, but you will get better results, of course. And then you have the time to time, which is useful as well, which allows you to select in for example, in frame 0, I want to see the frame number, I don't know, 50. So I can start in the 50 frame in this effect and then apply the speed that I want. So I can combine both parameters together. Is there built noise reduction or should we use Neat Video? We have a noise reduction, of course. So let's go to here. I don't know if this is going to be a good example. Let's go to the blue. Yeah, the blue channel can work for here. All right, so in this shot, I'm going to use the denoise effect over here. So I go to the denoise. And the denoise as well works with optical flow. Optical flow is another very powerful feature in Mistika compared with other solutions. It's not that the other solution doesn't have optical flow. They have it, of course. But in Mistika, it's really, really fast. Even in, well, let's say normal projects, 2K, 4K projects, you can use optical flow effects and have real-time playback of the result, making retimers or denoise or applying the denoise, etc. Of course, it depends on the complexity of your project, the kind of media that you are using, etc. But we have a really, really fast optical flow. And we use it in this case for noise reduction. In fact, well, once I apply it automatically, we can just compare. Oh, yeah, this is because I have a different resolution. Let me put it first, my clip in the resolution of my project, like I did at the beginning. There we go. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, we have here, once I just apply it, is decreasing the value of the noise in my blue channel. The denoise has two modes, temporal, spatial, and combined. The combined, in fact, is a combination of temporal and spatial. If I select the temporal one, you see that the result, if I increase it to 9 frames, is even stronger. But of course, because it's using pure optical flow analysis, it can create some artifacts if the shot doesn't have enough information or there is a lot of movement. And that's the reason why we use the combined mode. Because the combined mode use a mask that we can define in my alpha. Basically, Mistika analyze the areas where there are movement, we can see in here. So now it's detecting the areas that were in movement. So in the white areas, it will be applied the spatial mode, which is basically like a small blur and a smart blur to remove the noise. And in the dark areas where there is no movement, it will apply the temporal mode, which is the stronger one, but again, is the one that is using optical flow. So you can work with this and combine and select the part that you want, soft your selection, increase, for example, your levels if you want to change a little bit the result. I'm going to decrease it. So let's say something like this. So now, for example, I will apply the temporal in the background and in the face and only the spatial in the hair, the jacket here, etc. So I can just select the areas that I want to use for for the denoising. And of course, I can combine it with shape by selecting here in alpha mode. So if I create a shape mode, a shape, we can just create shape here. Okay. If I create a shape, I can just select in my denoise the in alpha mode, and then it will use only the alpha to apply the denoise. I can just go to blue, and as you can see, we have an area with noise and the other area without noise. So you can combine it as you want. The good thing again is because the denoise can be integrated with any effect on here, because everything is perfectly well integrated. I can build my own alphas, I can build my own selections to apply the denoise in a very smart way. Okay, the last question is, can you comment on Mistika integration with BFX pipeline, especially if you know of workflows for versioning and updating BFX stakes coming from other software? Well, to managing version and updating effects, we have a really powerful tool, which is the match and paste tool. This means this can be used in this way. I'm going to select just, let's see, this timeline here. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to ungroup this. Okay. Well, this question can be answered in many ways, but I'm going to focus in this because another topic will be to talk about the support of EXR multi-layer in Mistika, which is a very important part of any visual effects pipeline, which is really great in Mistika. It's very well integrated, and the EXR are really well optimized in Mistika. But in this case, let's say that we have our shot that come from VFX, and then we get different shots with different duration. It's the same shot, but let's say it has different duration, etc. So I'm going just to cut it here. I have now my shots in different position, etc. Okay. And there we go. So I'm just organizing my timeline with my new shots that come from Visual Effects or any other, from a compositor or any other software. Just to make it a bit more complicated, I'm going to add some effects over here, like a blur, sharpen. Let's create, I'm going to remove one of the framings, and I'm going to add different unicolors. Okay, so now as you can see, we have mixed timeline with several nodes and effects. So what I'm going to do is to select all of them, copy, then I go to come in here, paste. Oh no, sorry, not paste, match and paste, sorry, which is Alt V. Go to match and paste. Oh, sorry. I'm going to select my clips, match and paste. There we go. And in here, I'm going to select which information I want to use to match your nodes. Do you want to use to match in your effects to the new clips or to the new timeline that comes from an editor or a visual effects software? So I'm going to select all of them and just paste. And as you can see, automatically Mistika has analyzed the shot and is applying the right effects to the new editing or to the new effects. Another answer for that question is if you use the same name for the same clips, because those are links. The moment that you replace a shot with another shot with the same name, etc., the link will point to that shot, so automatically will update the timeline. All right, so I think that's the last question for this masterclass. So I hope you like it, and I hope to see you soon in the next masterclass. Thank you.